Good morning, good afternoon, and a good evening to everyone, wherever you are joining it from. It is a great pleasure to warmly welcome you to this very first online engagement session of the Transboundary Freshwater Security Governance Train. My name is Yumiko Yasuda. I'm the Senior Transboundary Water Cooperation Specialist at the Global Water Partnership and the lead faculty of the massive open online course on governance for transboundary freshwater security, which was developed by the Global Water Partnership and the GFIW Learn, along with many global partners and experts from around the world in the field of transboundary water. We have received some question, what does MOOC mean? And MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course. And when we say this, MOOC, we are referring to this MOOC on governance for transboundary freshwater security. Since opening of this course in August 2020, this MOOC has attracted over 1,600 participants that confirm the need and interest for learning about this subject. This course is available for anyone to take at their own pace. In order to enhance learning experience and to provide opportunities for people to engage and interact with experts in the field, GWP and the Wuhan International Water Law Academy worked together to create an online event series called Transboundary Freshwater Security Governance Train. In this series of events, we'll be highlighting not only the key topics of transboundary freshwater governance, but also highlights the various examples and expertise from different geographic locations around the globe, as if a train is stopping at various locations in the world. Together with Wuhan International Water Law Academy, we are planning for 6 online sessions, specifically focusing on the topics of international water law. Today, it is the first of these sessions, and the topic is on the transboundary water agreements. I'll be introducing the topic for the rest of the session at the end of today's event, but I just wanted to mention that we have selected all of these topics and also the focus on the case study based on the interests expressed from our first event we conducted last year in October. Today's session has 2 main parts. The first part is a panel discussion by distinguished speakers where they will be sharing their experience on the topic and answering your questions. The second part is the breakout session where you will have opportunity to interact with the expert. We have a great lineup of session chairs and speakers for the next 1.5 hours. And today our transboundary freshwater train will be stopping at Africa, Europe, and Central Asia, welcoming speakers from all of these regions. I would like to just give you some housekeeping rules for today's session. This online session will be recorded, so people who couldn't join due to their other commitments or the different time zone would be able to see the discussions later on. Please also always mute your audio when the moderator or speakers are presenting. You can unmute your audio or will be invited to unmute your audio by the moderator or the chair when requested to speak. And particularly during the breakout session, you can unmute yourself. But during the plenary, please do keep your audio muted. This event will not only present your new knowledge, but will also welcome your inputs in the interactive part. So we count on your presence throughout the whole session. So please do stay to the end of the session. We will be also taking a group photo at the end. Today's session is designed to be as interactive as possible for you to be able to ask your questions to experts and also provide your thoughts and feedback to the subject. We'll be using Poll Eve as a main interactive tool, particularly during the first session. Now, some of you may have already used this Poll Eve while waiting for the event to start. So let's see the first Poll Eve questions. Here now you can see it on the screen. The first Poll Eve question was, where are you joining from? You can still type in now. If you can go to www.polleve.com/GWP. If you can just type in, I think my colleague has typed it also into the chat. You can type this into your browser, your computer, from your phone or your tablet, and then type in your answers, where you are coming from. So it's really great to see we have a lot of people coming from different locations in the world, in Africa, many people also in Europe. We have people from Asia and also from Australia. I see somebody joining. I also see people joining from North America and also in South America. I think it's Brazil. Wow, that's really amazing considering the time difference that you have. It must be super early in the morning. Now I even see someone from the west coast of the American continent. That must be really, really super early in the morning or very late in the night. So thank you so much for all of you from joining. And great. I see also in the chat, there's a lot of people typing here. Yes, people also coming from Middle East. Thank you so much. So we will be using this poll as a way to get your input. So I would now like to go to the next question. What do you think about this? How many transboundary river basins worldwide lack any cooperative arrangement at all? 85%, 60%, 30%, or 5%? Please type in what you think is the correct answer. And I should give you the hint that this question is based on the SDG reporting of the 6.5.2, which is 6.5.2 is a measurement towards progress towards transboundary water cooperation. Great to see so many responses now coming, and I see the answer B, which is 60% of transboundary basin is lacking cooperative arrangement. And that is correct answer, actually. So congrats to those who have selected the correct answer. You can see from that this means any cooperative arrangement at all. So really nothing is happening. So we still have a long way to go to really achieve this objective of really ensuring the transboundary freshwater security around the globe. So I'm sure all of you coming from a wide range of sectors and the roles would have a really important role to play in achieving this goal. And I hope that the MOOC and also the sessions like this will really help you to improve the situation at wherever you are working. Now, let's go to the next poll question. So, should all the transboundary basins have transboundary agreements in place? Yes or no? So this is what you think, whether all the transboundary basins have transboundary agreements in place. So this is a question related to today's event very much. So just type in which you think. Now I see most of you, it seems that all the transboundary basins should have transboundary agreements in place. So yes, again, in the previous questions, we found out that 60% of those basins do not have any arrangement. So this will be a major role, another step that we need to take if we want to achieve this. So thank you very much for your input. The final question during this introductory session, if you could go to the next question, is that we would like you to type any questions you would like to ask the panelists. Okay, our technical team is now going to switch to the next question. Please just wait a moment while this technical issue will be resolved. But actually, yes, actually, it's not on the PowerPoint, but if you actually go to the poll if, you've already seen some of the questions. So what we would like you to do now is we would like you to type any questions you would like to ask panelists for the session. And we have typed in some of the questions here already that some of you have submitted in advance of the sessions. And for the we have actually received over 120 questions as of this morning. So thank you so much for submitting those. Some of them will be answered during the panel discussion, but the ones that are not as yet assigned here are already typed in here. So what we would like you to do, please type in any other questions that you would like to ask panelists. And also, please vote. You can also vote. You can just go through all the questions on your browser, and you can vote the questions that you would like to see the responses for. And this will be used during the session to answer the questions. So we will keep this poll open throughout, and now while the panelists are speaking. So please go to the next slide. So just keep typing, keep voting while you listen to the session. James, Lisa, please go to the next slide. So in today's session, the next session would be now chaired by two distinguished guests from the Wuhan International Water Law Academy, Professor Patricia Waters and Dr. David Devlavnik. Next slide, please. So Professor Patricia Waters, many of you may know, she's a founding director of the Wuhan International Water Law Academy. And she has an extensive experience, over 30 years experience in the field of international water law and transboundary water. And she's also published extensively, and she's also a founding director of the University of Danube UNESCO Center Water Law and Policy, and also established the China International Water Law Group at the Xiamen Law School, where she was appointed under the Chinese 1000 Talent Program. The fun fact of her is that she has a dual nationality, Canadian and Belgium, and lives mostly in Scotland, so commuting to Wuhan. So very dynamic person, international person, and her biggest achievement in life is the family. And our second chair is Dr. David Devlavnik. So Dr. Devlavnik, an emerging young scholar in the law of international water courses. He's currently teaching at the Chongqing University in China in the area of international environmental law with a focus on law international water courses. He has published various international journals, and his monograph is on reciprocity and China's transboundary waters, the law of international water courses, was recently published with Routledge. The fun fact is that David is a bit of an adventurous eater, willing to try anything from including sandworms to cicada. That is really amazing. I would like to ask him how it has tasted. And also the biggest achievement in his life is that he's now mastered Chinese after moving to China in 2014. And I should also mention he's also from Canada as well. So I would now like to hand over to two distinguished chairs to really start the main session and introduce all the rest of the speakers. Patricia, Pat and David, floor is yours.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Yumiko. Fantastic as usual. And I'd like to start by saying welcome to everybody. It's so impressive to see so many people from so many parts of the world here today learning about international water law. We really want to keep things simple and interactive. And so what the speakers and I are doing are making less is more so that we can take on more questions. So first, we're focusing on transboundary water agreements. We're going to be looking at what they are. Content will give you sort of a structure and approach, why they might be important, and how to do them. And the International Water Law Lecture Series, which is being advanced through the Wuhan International Water Law Academy, really is going to have a legal focus, and legal focus in terms of trying to enhance and facilitate transboundary cooperation in line with so much of the work that GWP is doing. So the next series of lectures, there'll be 6 of them from now until June, will focus on legal aspects of cooperation. We've developed a legal analytical framework, and this has been used now for almost 30 years as a backdrop for what lawyers and also practitioners look for in a transboundary water agreement. And basically, we scan it for these 5 elements. The first key element in any agreement, and remember, an agreement can be a treaty, a convention, an international instrument. They all mean the same thing. So a transboundary water agreement in the first instance should have a definition of scope. Who are the parties? What are the waters that are covered by the instrument? And these things sometimes are more difficult or more complex than you think. So we look for scope in the first instance, usually at the beginning of a treaty. Next, we look at substantive rules, and these are the legal duties. And to understand substantive rules, the question you should ask yourself, if you were the judge trying to determine who should get what use of what water, what are the rules of this agreement that you look to apply? The governing rule in customary international law, of course, is equitable and reasonable use, the main substantive duty. Procedural rules are also normative duties, and if you breach these, there still will be state responsibility, but these are mostly rules of procedure. And so these are things you have to do, like notification, exchange information. So we look for procedural duties. The fourth element of a good transboundary water cooperation regime or transboundary water agreement is institutional mechanisms. And these are where we look for what are the roles of joint bodies, river basin organizations, conference of the parties. What institutions have to do what under the agreement? This is what we look for under institutional mechanisms. And finally, a good transboundary water agreement should have some sort of dispute settlement, compliance review, dispute avoidance mechanism so that we can go forward. And so in short, those are the things we look for in every transboundary water agreement. And it's interesting because when you listen to our excellent speakers today, each of them covers these. That's all I have to say for now. I'd be happy to take more questions during the breakout room, and I'll hand over to Dave. Thanks a lot. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Patricia, for your excellent introduction to the topic of transboundary water agreements. And thank you, Yumiko, for your introduction of us co-chairs. Today, as panelists, we have 3 distinguished speakers from various different backgrounds. Our first speaker is Dr. Bernadette Ajay. Then we have Peter Kovac and Dinara Ziganchina. Please, next slide. Bernadette is currently Chief Legal Officer at the Water Resources Commission of Ghana. She is a lawyer and also development studies expert, holding a PhD from the University of Ghana, an LLM in environmental law from the University of Nottingham, and an LLB from the University of Ghana. She has contributed to drafting the Code of Conduct for Equitable Use of the Volta River in West Africa and involved in INECE enforcement network programs and has published on enforcement networks in Ghana. Together, she is also part of the UNEC drafting group, where she helped to develop a checklist for the establishment of transboundary water joint bodies. She has 15 years working experience in the water sector in Ghana as Chief Legal Officer for the Water Resources Commission. She specializes in transboundary water governance and development of institutional frameworks for transboundary water cooperation. A fun fact, Bernadette loves the rain, and as no surprise, that's probably why she works with water. And her life goal is good balance between family and work, and mission accomplished as she's living it. Welcome, Bernadette. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Peter Kovac, who's head of River Basin Management and Water Protection Unit at the Ministry of the Interior of Hungary. He is formerly the chair of the UNECE Water Convention from 2015 to 2018 and continues to serve as vice chair. He's responsible for implementation of over 30 bilateral memorandums of understanding on water cooperation with various neighboring countries. Peter always wears funny ties, usually with cartoon characters. Maybe try and see which tie he is wearing today. And his biggest accomplishment personally is his family, while professionally it was the global opening of the Water Convention during his chairmanship. Welcome, Peter. Next slide, please. And our final panelist is Dinara Ziganshina, Scientific Information Center for Interstate Commission for Water Coordination of Central Asia. She has 20 years experience as a legal and policy expert in water resources management at both a national and international level. In addition to her work, she's also associate professor at the Tashkent Institute of Irrigation and Agricultural Mechanization Engineers and vice chair of the implementation committee of the UNEC Water Convention. A fun fact about Dinara is that the bravest thing she's ever done was a 41-kilometer non-stop bike trip around the Loch Tummel in Pitlochry in Scotland. And her biggest achievement in life is peace of mind. Welcome, Dinara. So for our first speaker, we'd like to pass it over to Bernadette Ajay. Bernadette, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll touch on transboundary waters. Why is it important? The best practices where no agreement exists. Because in the poll, I see people, the question was asked whether we should have a transboundary agreement, and there was some no answer. So in case there's no agreement, what do you do? And then recommendations and conclusions. Next slide, please. And so transboundary water agreements is a tool for cooperation under international law. Under the UN Charter, states have sovereignty over their resources. But transboundary waters take a different form. They are a shared resource between states, and it becomes necessary that there is a level of diplomacy, engagement, and agreement when it comes to sharing of the water course. And so the agreement becomes a tool and a platform for cooperation. It enables riparian states that share a common water course to manage, use, and sustain shared resources in the form of planning, where when there's a joint body, you get approvals for the kind of activities that you can do on the water course. Notification processes, that's the procedural rules, that when we are sharing a water course, what do you do when one country wants to undertake a project? International environmental impact assessment processes. When there's an agreement, you get a platform and a tool to do so. In case of benefit sharing, when a water course is shared, upstream state and downstream state dynamics come in. Sometimes it's important that one state or two states come up with projects and benefits are shared, so as not to stress the water course ecologically. And then for dispute settlement, and Article 33 of the UN 1997 agreement, disputes come up when it comes to water use. One country has an interest in using it in one way and another in another. So when disputes come up, it becomes important that there's a platform where parties or states can meet. When there are no agreements, it's a bit of an ad hoc arrangement. And so this is quite necessary. And as I had indicated, a transboundary water course has an ecological nature. The definitions for transboundary waters look at surface water and groundwater. And you're looking at the entire river or the entire water body from the sources to the deltas and the confluence at the sea. And to manage it, you have different countries owning different parts of this water course. Countries cannot manage it piecemeal. And so because of this ecological nature, and the fact that climate change is something that affects the whole water course. If you take water bodies like Lake Chad that are shrinking, if countries do not come together and manage it as a unitary whole, you have challenges when it comes to the sustainability of that water course. Next slide, please. And so when no agreements exist, and over 60% of these water courses do not have agreements on them, when no agreements exist, what do you do? Under customary international law, where states have existed and managed their relationships in a certain way, they can rely on those workable systems to manage the water course. And so one of the key principles under international law is cooperation, that states must cooperate in the use of shared resources, and also no harm rules, that when you are using a water course, you should not do certain things that will cause harm to your neighboring state in the form of pollution and others. And so when no agreements exist, you can rely on customary law. The SDG encourages us under Goal 6 that we share our water courses and come up with agreements to manage it. And as states, where agreements do not exist, we can rely on some of these declarations. There can be bilateral agreements and engagements. For example, between Ghana and Burkina Faso for many years from the 1990s, we had joint technical bodies, we had bilateral agreements where we shared data, and when infrastructure development, we cooperated with each other. And then through bodies like ECOWAS, regional bodies can encourage states. UNEC has been encouraging states to come together and agree on certain uses of the water course. Projects also. In the Volta, we had a project which helped transboundary communities cooperate with each other on the use of the water course. Next slide. And so because of the upstream downstream dynamics and the breakroom session, we may discuss it more, where different countries only different parts have different needs and different environmental considerations, it becomes important to have a shared agreement basis. And then because of the ecological nature, as I said, and then joint projects and benefit sharing for developing countries especially. They don't all need to develop projects on the water, but one country can develop to save the ecological nature of the water, and then they share the benefits to it. And so this is a short introduction of the importance of having transboundary agreements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. Can I ask that our next speaker, Peter Kovac?
Yes, thank you very much for the kind introduction as well. My today's style is a very nice one with a goofy character, so I'm keeping my style as usually. So I'm coming from a country who has a lot of responsibility over water management, and I can tell you that water management is a traditional activity in the country, surrounded by high mountains, so very affected by very quick run of the flood down to the hills. And we also upstream and downstream country at the same time, so we are just transiting water. Next slide, please. So the major problem is that we have all the big volume of water entering into the country, or a very few of the water which is present for the everyday use. And that is why for us, the transboundary cooperation it's a need, it's an obligation. And I think it's also very important to highlight the different levels of transboundary cooperation. So we have to practice bilateral cooperation, as we have 7 neighbors and 6 is upstream and 1 is downstream. We are part of multilateral cooperation like the Danube Convention or the Helsinki Convention. And we also, as a member state, we have to comply with certain obligation coming from the European membership. So we have legal obligation to do many things on the water field. And of course, the global water cooperation is also very important for us. And I think it's very important for everyone. Next slide, please. Just a few highlights because the time is extremely short. So the Danube River Protection Convention, which is also known as the ICPDR, after the name of the commission, which is working on the Danube Basin. And it's also took a very important role to coordinate all the actions on basin-wide scale related with the implementation of the Water Framework Directive. And I have to mention that only half of the countries are a member state, and the other countries are voluntary, took up the responsibility. And these responsibilities includes the elaboration of river basin management plans and also flood risk management plans. Next slide, please. And of course, as a former chair and now vice chair of the UNEC Water Convention, I have to mention that after the global opening, it could be a very important tool for every country in the world, because it's laying out or laying down all the basics of transboundary cooperation. It has a legal strong base, and it has an institutional framework, and it has also capacities to support the countries. So we are very, very enthusiastic that we already had new countries from Africa joining to the Water Convention, and we have a very serious negotiation with many other countries from practically from all continents. Next slide, please. And that was from my side, and I would like to suggest to also have a look at the web page of the ICPDR and also on the web page of the Helsinki Convention. You will find a lot of very useful material, and everything is available on English language, so it might be easier to use on the ICPDR website, and on the UN website you will find many possibilities to find materials on several languages. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, so much for sharing your experience with us. Our next speaker is Dinara Ziganchina. Dinara?
Thank you very much, Dave. Hello, everyone. Thank you for stopping in Central Asia, in this wonderful region. And I think we're quite ahead of many transboundary basins, because we do have treaties and we also have a river basin organization. So we have something to share. In addition to challenges we have, I think we also have a great achievements here in the basin with the quite young states. Central Asia, as defined by UNESCO, include 5 post-Central Asian countries: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. By the wider definition of Central Asia and the basin country in the Amudarya, it's also Afghanistan, which is in the RLC basin, the largest basin in the region in Central Asia. And we also have another smaller basins, or basins where one of the countries of Central Asia share the basin with other countries. I will not name them, but you can read in this slide. And at the next slide, I would like to focus on very similar to what Peter said, on the numerous treaties at multiple scale. I think it's one of the main features of the contemporary international law that will work at the multiple scales, at multiple levels. And I think the best achievement of international law in the community of us would be how to connect best these different levels, starting from global, pan-regional, regional, and basin, and also bilateral agreements. And I would like also to focus that it's not only water agreements, it's also agreements related to other environment-related and development-related issues, such as water, biodiversity, wetlands, climate change, desertification, energy system, etc. And also border agreements, which are very relevant, especially in our region. And at next slide, you can see some key features of the transboundary treaties that are applicable in the RLC basin. I think one of the key features of the region that the countries themselves sign immediately international treaties when they gain independence. So it was a very prompt decision as a reaction to the crisis that they had after the collapse of the Soviet Union to establish the legal platform and institutional platform to peacefully regulate river flows in Central Asia. They fixed the status quo to ensure the stability. And I think it's an achievement of the countries of the region that they manage in very difficult social, economic, and political circumstances, keep doing daily water management with a different level of success on different issues. But the fact that we have a peace and we have the still operation of the Commission, I think it already shows us that we can learn something from this experience. And going back to what Pat was saying about the different elements of the legal regime, I would like also to mention about the scope including what countries are engaged in river basin management. All countries of Central Asia except Afghanistan. So here's the room how to attract Afghanistan to management of transboundary waters in the Amudarya basin. And what Peter just said about voluntary membership in the River Basin Commission probably might be one of the first steps in this kind of engagement. We also have very limited regulation on groundwater and ecosystem management, which can be another area for improvement. On substantive norms, the countries do have the transboundary water allocation principles, which are somehow reflect the even uncertainties about the climate change, because they are proportion-based water allocation. They are not fixed, and they reflect water management situation in each particular year and the season. But of course, there is no more precision what is equitable and reasonable, and how to reallocate on different circumstances if the interest of the countries will change on this particular water entitlement. And there is a quite significant restriction on the no harm rule, not allowing even the smaller changes in the river flow regulation, and only very general provisions related to environmental protection. And on procedural norms, unfortunately, also very weak provision on information exchange, no direct reference to consultation, and no detailed provision on notification on planned measures. You may know that we have in upstream countries and also in downstream countries some plans and projects for construction of hydropower dam and other facilities that might affect or might have transboundary impact, but there is no very clear rules how countries have to interact in that kind of circumstances. Joint bodies, as I mentioned, we do have International River Basin Commission that was established, which operate on daily basis, which has more than 1,050 people working on daily water management operation. But the challenge is that it doesn't include Afghanistan, but also does not include Kyrgyzstan right now, because the Kyrgyzstan suspended its membership in 2060. So the task now is to bring back Kyrgyzstan and to attract the ways of cooperation with Afghanistan. And compliance review and dispute settlement, quite challenging, I would say. There is no clear provision on monitoring of the compliance, and dispute has to be settled by the water ministers themselves. And in the last slide, I would just to sum up 3 lessons that we can learn from this basin. Of course, there are many others, but what I would like to mention, the treaties in the basin was signed as response to the crisis, to political transformation and socio-economic changes. And after that, for 25 years, we did have some law-making exercises and did have some treaties, but they did not change fundamental agreement that was signed in 1992. And reflecting back on also on the question on the poll, I think it's very important to the function of the treaty to establish the community, normative communities. But what we have here in Central Asia, it's more institutional community, more community of water professionals, which is excellent, that helps to run technical issues. But it would be even better if we could widen this multi-sectoral community and make it more normative when the law is guiding behavior and when we have the collective concerns, expectations. And finally, I think there is a lot of room for the role of global and pan-regional treaties. As Peter mentioned, especially UNEC Water Convention really does a lot for countries in the region to make international water law more accessible through different guidelines and also projects and the operation of the implementation committee under the UNEC Convention. So this is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists for your excellent presentation and the stops of the train in each of your home countries and regions. Next, we're going to be moving on to a panel discussion, and I'll hand it over to my co-chair, Patricia Waters, who will guide us through the questions.
Hey, thanks, Dave. First, I'm going to say thank you for the speakers. They gave excellent presentations in a very short format, and we agreed that that's how it should. I'll just put on gallery here. That's how it should be. We wanted short and sharp. And now what we're going to do, Dave and I went through almost 120 questions from about 200 participants, and we tried to group them into the most relevant. That doesn't mean we're not going to take more questions. And could I just say, the point of this session of the whole International Water Law series is to be accessible. So no question is a silly question. Every question is welcome. We will take anything. We want you to know that we are accessible, that international law and these experts are here to help. We want to build a community of cooperation, and I want you to know that you are welcome to speak to international water lawyers. We are a friendly group. There's need for more communities of interest. So we're going to go to these questions. Sorry if yours isn't here, but we've looked at them and we're collecting them and we will deal with them. The first question I'm going to put to Danara. Danara, thanks for your presentation. What are some of the main differences between the UNECE Water Convention and the UN Watercourses Convention, and how does that apply to transboundary river basins, say in your region in Central Asia?
Thank you, Pat. Excellent question. I think I would rather talk about not the differences, but the complementarity. We had a lot of different analysis done by the professors of international law saying that the provision of these two conventions do not contradict each other. And the relations between them is the relations of interpretation and complementarity, how one can complement, supplement other provisions. So if you would like to talk about the differences, it will be the level of details on different specific provisions. Just few examples. For example, Water Convention has more details on all appropriate measures to prevent, control, and reduce transboundary impact. On the other hand, UN Watercourses Convention has more specifics on the equitable and reasonable use, on prior notification, on the procedure of the prior notification in the case of planned measures. And but I think the most important difference probably in institutional mechanisms, both in the joint bodies, because the UNECE Water Convention makes it mandatory for the countries to establish river basin institutions and sign the basin agreements, which is not for the New York Water Convention or Watercourses Convention. It's up to the countries establish it or not. And what UNECE Water Convention also does, it provides the great institutional support for the convention and the parties of this convention through the meetings of the parties, expert groups, legal board, implementation committee, etc. And I think it's one of the greatest differences, but I think we all have to think how to make the strength of one convention to work for the strength of another. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Could we have the slide again for the questions? Oh, here we are. Okay, number 2, I'm going to ask Peter, please. How can we apply the global water conventions at a regional level when not all states are parties to them? And I find, Peter, and you did a great job in your presentation and your experience in the field, especially in Europe. Europe has this nested legal matrix of agreements that apply, right from the UNW, global conventions, regional conventions, bilateral conventions, the Water Framework Directive. How do you do it? How can how can states learn from your experience? Thank you, Peter.
Yes, thank you very much. It's not easy to answer to such a question, and similar question has raised several times when we were talking about the accession to the Helsinki Convention. Countries ask, why should we, let's say, part of the convention if the neighbors are not the part of the convention? But I think the major message from the global water conventions that you have to apply the basic provisions, the basic of which are laid down in the conventions are necessary to transform into the everyday life. So I can tell you that most or every of the Transboundary Commission are also working in or in line of the provisions of the global water conventions. So it's very important to have the countries also to have a very sound base for negotiation as well, and they can have also use the global water conventions if they are part of it, that it's an obligation for them to fulfill. For example, it is my obligation to establish a working body on transboundary water management. And if you can apply such a request to the neighbors, it's very difficult and more difficult to say that we are not willing to cooperate with you. So I think it's also have a very good, let's say, political capital for the countries who are already a member of any of global water conventions. And I also want to just refer back what Dinara already mentioned several times, that there is no contradiction between the global water conventions. They are complementary. One is strongest in one point of view, the other is strongest from the other point of view. So I think it's really important to urge or to promote the countries to be part of any of the global water conventions, because it might influence their everyday routine cooperation with the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And I could just sit and talk to you all day about your experience. I don't know how you manage, but you're doing a great job. Thanks, fantastic. Bernadette, oh, Bernadette, we had a chat. We were talking about things in Africa. I remember so many students that we had when we were in Dundee, and especially one student who raised the issue of communal rights to the river, access to the river, and how important that was. And so I thought we picked this question for you. How are transboundary water agreements implemented at the domestic level? And this is really, as you know, about different levels of governance, right down to the river, the community on the river, civil society. How does it work? How does it work in Ghana?
Okay, so for domestic level implementation of agreements, the first point is that for a country to be bound, the country must ratify the agreement and domesticate it, in the sense of putting in place national legislation that seeks to enforce the rights that have been picked up at the international level. So you ratify, you have your national plans, national laws, and then an implementation plan that helps the country to do implementation at the national level with the necessary institutions to look at it. Now, to implement these laws, most states, and Ghana does so, to check that it is not in conflict with already existing laws or communal rights, because community members in any area have access to the water. And so if you take the Water Resources Act, for example, there are exemptions of certain licensing procedures for community members, so they can have free access to the water. And so customary rights are respected and shaped in a way that it flows from the international obligation to a national obligation to a community level. So that scale is respected at all points. Many states will not take up obligations that would go against the interest of their national. But of course, when you look at water management, you're looking at the whole ecological question. You are looking at doing something that will preserve the sanctity of the water and also serve the needs of people. And in this line, plans that are made would always take care of these considerations. So that is the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bernadette. Wow, I could speak with you all day too. Well done. I mean, and hands-on on making it work at a national level, up and down the way. We're going to move to the next row of questions. And this time we're going to go to Peter. Peter, this is a good one for you. What makes a transboundary water agreement effective? And how do you do it in Europe?
Yes, I think one of the key of the effectiveness to utilize the transboundary agreements, that you have to be honest with your neighbor. So the trust building is very important part. I think when you have, let's say, an open floor for discussion on the transboundary issues, you might make a very successful one. It's not need anymore to hide anything, because everything is very open. So at least from the news, you will know what are the neighbors are doing with the water resources. So the frankliness, the openness, I think it's one of the key of the success. And of course, the technical cooperation might also improve, let's say, even the political cooperation level, because sometimes the countries has political tensions. But on the way of technical cooperation, you can overbridge such a problems. You might try to exclude the politics, and in this case, you can find a compromising solution from a technical point of view. I'm also a civil engineer, so I also trying to, let's say, find facts whenever I asking for something from the neighboring countries and vice versa. So I think this cooperation, the trust building is key of the effective transboundary water management. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. You raised a lot of important issues there. And I remember early on in my studies about 30 years ago when I was looking at the Canada-US Boundary Waters Columbia River Treaty. And they said, what we do first is we get the lawyers out the door and we bring in the engineers to get the facts. So we needed an international agreement, but then we had to look at the facts and the trust and the institution building. And if you look at, for those of you who know the US Mexico Boundary Waters Treaty Agreement, I mean, that's over 100 years old, and they still keep it alive with a series of mini agreements between mostly engineering decisions. So you raise a good point, the trust, and we find scientific trust at the institutional level, but based on an agreement, based on a transboundary water agreement. So that's interesting. Now, the next question, I have Danara here. Danara, can transboundary agreements reduce the risk of conflict? And how do we settle disputes when they arise, where there is an agreement and when there is no agreement? Thanks, Danara.
It's quite simple, but also very difficult question, I would say, because immediate answer is yes, and because the international is about enabling peaceful interaction between the nations, international organizations, etc. But if you look at the root of the problem, as Peter mentioned, it's about people and it's about the countries. And it's very much, it depends what we want to make out of this treaty. We want to use it for the peaceful interaction, for dealing with the issues, or we want to complicate situation. So it's about the goodwill. And I think it's another main principles of international law of goodwill in engaging in international relations, in drafting international law and implementing international law. It has to be goodwill in cooperation and, in our case, in sustainable water management. And international law can provide a multiple step approach in preventing and mitigating disputes if they arise. As we already mentioned, it starts with the joint bodies, technical group, expert groups, who first try to deal with this issue, as Pat mentioned, based on the facts and technical issues. Then, if it's not successful or in parallel, it can go to diplomatic means, negotiation between the countries, or it can be mediation if needed, good officers, conciliation, it can be arbitration, it can be even court. So it's very much, it depends on what you want to choose. If you want to make it internal, it can be very internal procedure for the countries only. If you want to have the third party involvement, it can be external, that you bring neutrality, impartiality into the dispute. So I think here it's international law can suggest a lot. And also two global water conventions bring innovation in this dispute settlement apparatus, with the UNEC Water Convention suggesting implementation committee with the expert group who can provide advice and help countries. And UN Water Courses Convention also has very unique mechanism with this impartial fact finding. So I think the countries have a lot of tools that can use for preventing and dealing with the disputes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Danara. And I know that you have firsthand experience, so it's not like you're sitting at a research desk, writing about dispute settlement, but you're at the coal face. And that's each of the speakers today offer that real life experience. So now we have a third question here for Peter. And then I think I think we have time, Dave, for another round of questions. So we might go to three more questions after this if we have time. We've got about 5 minutes. So this question, Bernadette, I think is this one. Let me see. Do transboundary agreements work? Oh, Bernadette, we picked a good one for you. Do transboundary agreements work differently for upstream and downstream states? I mean, we see so many of that during the drafting of the UN Watercourses Convention, and a lot of states voted against it or would abstain because they thought it was an upstream convention, a downstream convention. It's both. What do you say about the upstream downstream?
So I think that some of the engagement in the chat and the questions coming, we have to recognize that we are not working with a perfect system. We are looking at states with sovereignty issues, with economic issues, with political issues. And so the joint bodies become a platform for engagement, where we are looking at the water course as a whole. So downstream, upstream considerations always come in. If you look at upstream, the needs are different. They are looking at releases. How can water be released downstream? Do we maintain some for irrigation purposes? Do we build infrastructure? How do we manage droughts if it's a drier area? Downstream is looking at flows into the country, issues about floods in cases where the upstream state is releasing water at certain times, and pollution control. And so both states will come to the table with these different considerations, and it becomes quite difficult to negotiate if there's no trust and openness. Definitely, it becomes a platform for discussion to consider the needs of each of these states. So in the Volta Basin, for example, we are now looking at issues about the flows and the environmental flow considerations, and that discussion is ongoing. There's been a series of meetings to look at how to consider the flows that come downstream, manage flooding, and also issues about pollution if you take Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire considerations. And so that is always something that should be at the forefront of all negotiators when they go to the table, that you are coming from different regions with different interests and needs. But then you are looking at using the water course in a beneficial manner whilst preserving the ecosystem of the water body. So that is it.
Okay, great. Bernadette, can I keep you there? Because we're going through the questions now. We'll just have, if we ask each of you to be brief, we'll take maybe one or two more. I'll go to maybe Peter next. Bernadette, here is a question. Because you were talking about this in your presentation and just now, how do transboundary water agreements affect other aspects of the world, such as climate change and the economy? I mean, how do we, water, as we always say in the community, is connected to everything. It affects everything. So how do you deal with that connectivity between water agreements, climate change, economic issues? Just, I'm sorry to say, but short, what do you say?
Okay, so what I would say is that prior to engaging in a transboundary agreement, it's important for a state to have a clear picture, or at least do an assessment of all other obligations that are existing elsewhere. And really, if you are managing the transboundary water courses in such a way that there's enough water, you are dealing with climate change considerations. And you can also come up, if you are doing buffer zone restoration, you are looking at climate change adaptation. And so these are the kind of linkages that can be done. If you're looking at human rights, the right to water. If you are managing flows, and then people are getting the right to water. So this is a short list how I can look at the linkages. It's important to know all obligations undertaken under different agreements before you commit to new ones. And when you commit to the new ones, in the drafting, it's important to do the linkages so that the overlaps are reduced. Then in the implementation plan, you look at institutions, look at their different roles and mandates, and try and bridge it so that you can have a positive outcome. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Oh, wow. Amazing short answer, but you've got a whole checklist of things that just came up like that, like a true implementing lawyer. One last quick question, Dave, if I may, give me the thumbs up okay. Last quick question. I'm going to go to Peter. Peter, and then I guess, Dave, we go to the breakouts. We come back. Okay, thank you. Okay, Peter, how are these agreements negotiated? Is there a model that you follow? Peter?
Yes, thank you. I think every negotiation is very unique because it's depend on your partners as well. And how it can be implemented successfully. That is why we took, let's say, the initiative in the UNEC Water Convention to elaborate a kind of checklist or a guideline, which elements include into the new working water management agreement. And the negotiation has to be started, let's say, also on a political level, not only on the technical part, because first of all, you need a political approval to start the negotiation. And after, when you are entering into the technical phase, it's still a very difficult task because the interests of the countries are extremely different. We just talk about the downstream and upstream countries. So they have a completely, let's say, different field of interest, and they want to defend it during the negotiation process. So you have to find always a kind of compromising solution. The best form, if you can offer a kind of win-win solution, which might have benefit for both countries, not only the downstream, but also to the upstream. And the way of negotiation, it's also depending on the structure, what you have in the neighborhood, because many countries has a completely different structure. In many parts of the world, the water is divided between many ministries. So the responsibility is laying on several actors, and sometimes it's very difficult to find even, let's say, the contact points, who to maintain the negotiation. But first of all, you have to be proactive. So you have to start if you are, let's say, neighborhood are not willing to do that. So it's very difficult, and usually it's taking a lot of time. Just few exemplar. I had just negotiated a new agreement between my neighbor Serbia. We did it within 1 year successfully. And we have also some agreement, which is just revision, and it's still pending since more than 10 years for different reasons. So it might be an easy task and also extremely difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting on short and fast, long and hard, and it depends on the politics. Okay, Dave, thanks a lot for feeding me the questions. I think now, James, I think what we're doing now, I see a couple of hands raised. You can, we won't take any questions to the plenary, but we're going into breakout groups now. So James or Yumiko, I guess we all split up. Each of the speakers, okay, we've got a vote here. Oh, breakout groups. Here's the breakout groups. Participants are invited to continue the discussion of 5 breakout groups. We've only got 20 minutes, but you can ask any question, any question. Facilitators are going to be the 2 co-chairs, so Dave and I, and Bernadette and Peter and Dinara are going to head them up. And you can ask whatever questions you want. We've got a long list, so I think we just go to that. Dave, is there anything else you want to add? No, we're good to go.
No,
okay,
I think we can go directly to breakout groups.
Yeah, so I think we'll just go out into 5 different groups. They're going to be randomly assigned, and there's going to be a timer, and then we all come back together again. James, is that right, James?
Yes, that's correct. And I'm now going to open the rooms. And so for the participants, once you receive a notification to join the room, so please join the room. And since we have taken a bit of time, breakout rooms will be on for 15 minutes.
Okay.
But we'll send you reminders when they're ready to close. So happy discussions.
And then when we close, we'll come back and we'll have summaries into the plenary. I'm going to ask, I'll kick off, and then we'll have maybe Dave and then Dinara. Okay, see everyone in the groups.
All right.
Looking forward to my group.
So it looks like most people are back from the breakout group. So I think we can move on to the final section of our event today. So I'd ask that all the panelists come back to us for a moment. We'll just do a quick report on each of the breakout groups, what happened in your discussion, and then if you could share any very final thoughts on the topic of transboundary agreements.
Okay.
Pat, could we start with you?
Oh, start with me, sure. Oh, I had just the best group. I mean, I actually had experts in my group, so I didn't have to answer any questions. Oh my, my Alexa turned on, sorry. Alexa, stop. Oh, sorry. So we had three or four questions. One was looking at transfers of water transfers for aquifers and how that is dealt with in international law. Professor Owen McIntyre provided us with how complex that is and how it's governed by the main rules of international water law. And then we had someone from Nigeria asking, she was very interested in scholarships at the Wuhan Water Law Academy. And I said, you can look actually on our website and there are some scholarship programs and we are doing an intake of students. She also asked, what are the rules of law that apply to China and marine pollution? And Dr. Yang Liu answered that, saying that it really very limited. We have to look at a combination of international law, national law on pollution. And then we had a colleague from Sudan who asked, how do we enforce bilateral agreements and what do we do where the other party doesn't want to talk to us? And Dr. Jing Li from Malaysia told us that, she went back to what Peter was saying about trust and maybe we should look beyond water into economic activity to see if we can build cooperation. So that's my summary. Fantastic group though, loved it.
Could we have Bernadette, could you speak next?
Yes. So in my group, we had more of sharing of concerns and also a few comments here and there. The fact that domestic politics becomes an issue when you have a federal system, and this can affect commitment at the national level to also commit to transboundary waters, is a key concern which water negotiations must keep in mind. And then for some regions, they may commit, they may sign the agreement, but ratifying it becomes also a concern. And over a period of time, because there's peaceful situation and there's no conflict, not much action is done to formalize the arrangements and engagements. And it becomes an important issue to consider. Also, Eddie, someone from South Africa shared some community of practice where not only the state actors, but also non-state actors like NGOs come together to help ensure that transboundary water agreements are implemented. And that becomes a key issue, that it's not only the state that has to act on it, but non-state actors must also take into consideration. And when we are managing these, the fear that once a transboundary water course, a country takes on the agreement, it becomes an internalization, like it's an international water course, now we have no control. Must also be a consideration that states must look at. And I was saying that in that sense, you look at the fact that the water body is a shared resource and you look at the ecological nature of it and the fact that managing it together becomes a very important consideration. Then the picture that is painted, that is there a bleak future for IWRM International, is something that when we are putting out the messages, you need to be concerned about. So this is what I got in my group. Thank you.
Peter, could you please just tell us what happened in your group?
Yes, we realized that the time is very short for discussion, and but we had some short introduction of the participants, and I realized that we are representing, let's say, a wider scale. Mostly people were from or representing a basin-wide organizations, and the major issue during how we can implement these conventions or whatever they are called, the very important message from my group that we have to deal with the political implications as well, because politics can influence very much how the implementation is going on the field. We were representing different regions, the Southeast Asia and also Central Asia and the European region. And I think, and I hope that every participant is agree on that it is one thing when we have a framework. How we are implementing this is the most important part, because we can have a very good, very nice agreements if they are in the drawer and then nobody take care of them, it's a quite bad message. So it's more important to implement those provisions either on bilateral, either on multilateral level. Thank you very much.
And our final panelist, Dinara.
Thank you, Dave. We had several different questions, starting from the how to deal with the climate change uncertainty in transboundary water management and allocation, that brought us to discussion on the role of data, information, modeling, and how we can better use it for lawmaking and law implementation. The second question was very kind of sensitive: how to build trust among the riparian countries and build ownership of their actions, and how to better use the role of the third party, external parties in the region in the lawmaking, especially where we're talking about the situation between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. The third question was about the situation in the Aral Sea, and I see Vadim Sokolov here with the map of Aral Sea, so he can provide more information on that. And the final question that was raised about how to implement at the basin level different concepts related to IRRM, ecosystem management, adaptive management, how we can make use of beauty of all these different concepts in enabling better water management. Thank you.
And in my discussion group, we had a few questions. We talked about the relationship between the European Union and Hungary, and perhaps if there are other institutions that have similar relationships with their riparian states. We heard about the SADC initiative as well as the Nile Basin initiative. And we also had a question similar to Dinara's panel on trust and how do we build trust between states, especially when they have difficulties agreeing perhaps on even simple things and more on the facts of the river basin and the hydrological factors. So how can we build trust to further state cooperation? At this time, I'm going to hand it off to Yumiko, who will... Yumiko?
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David, for that. I would like to now conclude our today's session. And while I'm doing that, I would like to ask all of you to please stay maybe a few more minutes. And sorry, we are a little bit running over time, but just for 2 more minutes. If you could just type into the chat what you have learned today, just in few words, and also what you would like to see next in the next session. This will really also help us to get your feedback. And we'll also be sending you after this event another email with some feedback. And it's very important for us to hear from you about what are the what you liked, what you didn't like, or your improvements and so on, so we can improve the next session. So thank you very much for that. I would like to now thank all the speakers and participants, and also the chairs, and the Wuhan International Water Law Academy, the co-organizer of this event. It has been a fantastic experience to even prepare for this session, but I think this 1.5 hour, very condensed, very, very effective, and everybody had such a fantastic job. And I think without all of your participation, we wouldn't have had this moment of excellent moment. So thank you so much for that. I would like to really especially thank Professor Patricia Wooders and Dr. David Malecek, Developnik, for really excellent organization. And also thank you, Peter, Bernadette, Dinara, for joining us with your excellent inputs to this session. And I would also like to thank the GWP team who has been behind this scene to reorganize the session. If you can go to the next slide, I would like to just inform you that to continue this learning, please do sign up to the MOOC. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have opened this MOOC, and this today our focus was on international water law, but we have 6 modules of diverse topics from international introducing transboundary freshwater security, water diplomacy and negotiation to international water law institution, management tools, and financing. And there are a lot of questions that we saw on Paul Eva. We are sorry we didn't have enough time to answer those questions, but some of the questions are already mentioned into this in the MOOC. You can also ask the questions in the discussion forum of the MOOC. So we can continue this conversation on the discussion forum, particularly on the discussion forum on international water law. So we will be also getting back to you about how that could be also done if you have any specific question on specific topic from this discussion, but there is already a quite active discussion forum going on. So please do sign up and check it out. Next slide, please. I would also like to inform you that I mentioned in the beginning, this is a series of events we are planning on the 6th international water law topic. And today was the first one. And next one will be next month on international water law and protection of ecosystem. Now, we'd like you to remember we are trying to do this every third Tuesday of the month. The session 3 would be on the water cooperation and role of institutions. Session 4 will be international water law and climate change. Session 5 will be on international water infrastructure projects. And the last one will be on the groundwater. So please stay tuned and welcome to join us. Please also, if you sign up for the MOOC, you will be getting automatically the information about this and also to the GW from the GW website. So thank you very much for this. Finally, I would like to invite you to join in taking the group photos together. So if you could now switch on all of your cameras before we say goodbye to everybody. And then give a big smile. Lisa, please, yes, thank you. So we can all see all of you who have joined. And please note that we may be using some of these photos for our promotional purposes. So I hope that is okay with all of you. If you don't want to be photographed, you can switch on your camera. But I hope many of you are okay with it. So please give a smile and maybe wave your hand. The big smile. I see some nice familiar faces from all over the world. So nice to see all of you. James, let us know once the photography session is over.
Right. It's everyone ready? I will take in 2 bits. 1, 2, and go. Smile. And then just hold on, another one, because we have 2 pages. 1, 2, and smile. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much. So thank you everybody for joining us. This is the end of the session. Thank you and welcome.
If I could jump in, please, Yumiko. We can't go away without thanking you. It's been an absolute delight to work with GWP. I want to give a shout out, please, to the back room, Lisa, Gergana, Tobias, who's been amazing to work with, fantastic to work with my co-chair, Dave, and a big shout out to all of the Wuhan Academy. You guys have been fantastic. I look forward to welcoming everybody here. Everybody is welcome to come to Wuhan. See you in February. It's going to be Professor Alistair Clark and Professor Otto. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks, Yumiko. Bye, everyone.